All right. Hi, folks. Thank you for joining us in the Vermont Wild Kitchen.
Usually this time of year, we would be doing cooking seminars like this live.
The ramps come up during the springtime, and you can find them under deciduous trees, and they really like that full sunlight in the spring when the leaves aren't out.
This is a rear shank, so it came off one of the rear legs. Down here would be the bone that goes to the hoof, and then up here the rest of the leg.
This is my favorite part of any fish, is the cheek. It is just tender, sweet, succulent. It's the best bite. I'll take that over a loin, a belly, a tail any day. And there's a shame there's only two of them and they're so small on a fish.
Here's an example. There is this really beautiful brick red mushroom with this really gorgeous gloss and white all along the edge.
What we're really trying to do here is just bring you into our kitchens and show you just how easy and just how delicious it can be to not only cook with wild ingredients, but also pair those up with the farm fresh ingredients that can be found throughout Vermont.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in the Vermont Wild Kitchen. My name is Shane Rogers, and I am your host for the evening. We are so excited that you are tuning in to the Vermont Wild Kitchen tonight. First off, as you may know, we try to produce this show on a regular basis. Last production was in November, and Vermont Wild Kitchen is taking some time to figure out how best to engage more on this journey of really integrating wild food and Vermont local food together and making it more accessible and really celebrating all the loveliness that Vermont has to offer. So really, it's from these delicious meals that we share with our friends and family to all the important issues that we get to discuss while doing it and what they intersect with, which is what makes the Vermont Wild Kitchen so special. And this show is going to be no different. I am super excited to be welcoming in to the Vermont Wild Kitchen today Megan Hill from the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum and Ryan Yoder of Yoder Farm in Danby. And I would be remiss to not mention our benevolent partners in this, Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Rural Vermont, which if you have not had a chance to check them out, I would encourage you to do that. I am putting some links in the chats. And I would encourage you to sign up to get Vermont Wild Kitchen updates as well. You can do that at the link that I just dropped in the chat. For this episode today, we're really diving into all that Vermont has to offer this winter. We're going to be lifting up trout and maple and apple cider and yummy winter greens and really just getting down homey and lovely in our own kitchens. So to begin, I'd love to have Megan introduce yourself, and then we're going to go to Ryan, and then Ryan is going to kick us off with a really nice winter salad. Megan, do you mind telling us a little bit more about who you are?
Yeah, so I am Megan Hill, and I am the Education Programs Manager for the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum in Virginia. If you haven't been, we do pretty much anything to do with Lake Champlain and boats. One of our big specialties is underwater archaeology, which is a lot of fun, and it's really cool to learn all of that stuff about the shipwrecks in Lake Champlain. And yeah, we run a whole bunch of educational programs, including Fish Camp, which is coming up this summer. It's for kids who are 7 to 9. So you can imagine it's a lot of chaos as all of the kids are casting all at once and tangling their line all at once. But it's a lot of fun. So, yeah.
I love it. And I'm glad to know that Fish Camp is for kids and not for fish. So we'll be diving in a little bit more on that when we come back to you. And Ryan, let us know, who are you? Where are you showing up?
Thanks, Shane. Hi, Megan. It's nice meeting you. And I'm Ryan Yoder. And with my wife, Rachel, we are owners of Yoder Farm down in Danby, which is located south of Rutland and north of Manchester. And as part of this wild kitchen, my guess is why we were brought on is that we produce apple cider vinegar, which is, you see there, from wild apples. So it's not just your average cider vinegar. It's apples that we forage from trees that are mostly seedlings that have sprouted by being spread by deer and cows and other animals. And so technically maybe they're called feral, but wild sounds a little bit less feral, I guess.
Feral sounds cool though. It depends on who your audience is, right?
The cider is wild. And so we also grow a lot of vegetables. And so today I figured a nice dish this time of year is to have cider vinegar highlighted with maple syrup, because they go together great, and they go together really well with kale, which we just happen to have kale growing at the farm. And this time of year, the kale is, you almost don't need the syrup because it's so sweet, and it's kind of candy-like in and of itself. And so the cider that we make, the vinegar that we make, we actually, on the bottle, we have the massaged kale salad recipe.
Gotta love it. Kales need massages too.
Yeah. Kale needs massaging too. And it gets almost kind of a cooked sort of texture once it's been adequately massaged. And so I think it tenderizes it. And it takes up a lot less space. So if you are needing space in your fridge, if you massage that kale salad before, instead of just putting it in this sort of format where, you know, it's pretty bulky. And I'm going to actually move it into the bowl. And one thing that could be a very lovely way to go with kale salad is to de-stem leaves that are big. This is a relatively not so beautiful leaf. Definitely pull out things that are dead and rotting. And ideally you have nice young tender leaves of kale. It's par excellent. But once it's massaged, you know, some of the winter frosted leaves that are otherwise relatively unpalatable maybe come out a little bit better.
Yeah, I wonder too, you know, folks, we see kale all the time, right? It's almost like a year-round crop. But I don't know if folks realize just how delicious it is in the middle of winter. And it's one of those almost perennial, always available local foods that you can find from folks like yourself. What else are you growing at this time of the year, or that you're bringing to your community too?
Well, we grow a bunch of storage vegetables. We used to grow a lot of dry beans, and we would sell those at the farmer's market. And this year I didn't grow dry beans for the farmer's market because the wild animals tend to eat the dry beans. And they don't end up yielding that well. And so we have more potatoes and onions and some greens in our high tunnels. And then we make the cider vinegar, and we raise popcorn, which we sell popped. When we have enough of it, we sell kernels of popcorn as well. But the main thing are the vegetables, and this time of year, cider vinegar tortillas. We grow some corn that we then take to All Souls Tortilleria in Burlington, and from that corn, they make us tortillas, which we sell as tortillas. So we eat a lot of tacos, is what it comes down to, when we're not eating kale salad, which isn't every day. And just to go back to what you're saying, Shane, the kale is actually at its best right about now, flavor-wise. And we tend to prefer it in the winter and less in the summer when it's tends to not be as sweet or tender.
There is also just something to like getting green in your body, right? Like in the middle of winter where you're like, oh, thank God.
Yep.
I don't have to eat potatoes and onions and rutabagas and beets right now. I can at least also have some kale with that.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about your vinegar, Ryan. You know, you say you wildcraft the apples. What is the process for even making vinegar? I know I am still sitting in my kitchen with a fermenting crop full of apple cider that I was trying to wildly ferment that never took off. And I know my partner looks at it just as much as I do, wishing that I would clean it up. But I think I'm just holding on to it in hopes that maybe it'll magically figure it out. But like, how are you all going about doing this? How are you selling it and where?
Yeah. So cider vinegar it's actually a 2-stage fermentation. So to make hard cider, all that's required is apple cider and the right temperature and yeast, which naturally occurs on apples. So you don't actually have to do much to make hard cider except for put the apple cider in a carboy and create anaerobic conditions with an airlock and let it ferment, and it's going to turn into alcohol. And the cider vinegar is actually a little harder to make because once you've produced the alcohol, once you have the hard cider, you have to do a secondary ferment, which involves an aerobic process and bacteria. So it's a very microbial thing. And so you what we actually do is to aerate a tank that has hard cider in it after inoculating it with some of our vinegar. And then it takes about a month to make a couple 100 gallons of vinegar. One of the pretty cool side effects is that it actually also produces heat at the same time. And so the room where we make the vinegar gets up into the 80s, and I can kind of keep it in the 80s all winter, which makes for a nice place to hang out, except that you end up having a particular scent when it gets pretty stinky. But I'm in there anyway, and so I just deal with it.
I think we need to get rural Vermont onto advocating in the state legislature for subsidies, not for heat pumps, but for cider vinegar houses for people to put into their own places to heat for the winter. Because that sounds like a very lovely way to go about.
It would make your house smelly, though, is the only problem. So it's kind of similar. There's these things that are called compost heaters. You can bury pipes in compost and have hot water, and it's sort of a similar process. Microbes make heat.
And if we all smell like it, though, then it's just normalized. So.
Then it would just be normal. Yeah, we wouldn't even notice it.
That's so. Thank you for sharing that process too. And I'm putting it. You gave us a link about some of the benefits of the shocking benefits, as this person says, of cider vinegar in your diet. And I'll tell you what, I try to incorporate it, and you just can't beat it. Splash in your greens when you're cooking them with eggs. I tend to eat it in the morning, and I know you're about to show us just about how to go about incorporating it into some kale salad too.
Yeah, and drinking it with water is like a traditional health tonic that's been done at least since the Romans. The Romans would issue wine vinegar to their troops. The Roman soldiers would get it when they were on the march. Vinegar water.
Love it.
Yeah.
So if you want to be like the Romans, y'all, I dropped in the chat too where you can find Yoder's apple cider vinegar and others at all the places around the area. But a wonderful way to add some bright and zestiness to your winter days too.
theoretically.
So what are we
I'll
making
help.
today? I see you have a helper with you too, or you at
I
least
got
have
a
people
handful of
scooting around.
helpers that are sort of milling around. They're doing laps in here, making it a little wild.
There's no better way to advertise kale than to have kiddos sneaking by to steal some.
Yeah.
That's great.
Who's gonna?
I am loving it.
So what I'm going to do to make the kale salad is look at the recipe very briefly, and then I'm going to mostly ignore it because I didn't have bunched kale. And this called for 1 large bunch of kale sliced, 1 teaspoon of grated garlic, a teaspoon of maple syrup, and 2 tablespoons of cider vinegar. So I'm going to wing it. We also we make some other things with our vinegar that are infused vinegar. So we infuse them with some berries that we grow. We got a strawberry, we have a mixed fruit, and that also gets raw honey added to it, so that it's kind of a balsamic level of sweet and sour. And that, I think, would be a very suitable massaged kale salad dressing without having to
I'm just so pleased to see the hand shooting up wanting to eat more kale. So
it's like the periscopes coming out. Kale scopes.
We'll have to get Megan's team out there looking for what's underneath the counter in an archaeological dig.
Yeah. There we go. We'll put another dollop in. Just for
and you're putting this right on your kale before.
I'm just putting it right on.
Yeah.
You can mix the dressing ahead of time. I didn't get to that, obviously. I'd need another mixing bowl, and then I'm dolloping on some syrup.
And I think one of the best parts about this, though, is you can make this to the taste that you want, right? If you're not really into vinegar or you want to just keep trying it out, use less. And we always make ours in mason jars, and then we use an immersion blender. If you add some garlic, which I see you have, or maybe some mustard, it adds a really good emulsifier. So if you like it less coated and more like a top to the dressing, it's a really good way to go about trying to incorporate it all in a little bit.
Yeah. And I don't have a grater either, so I'm just chopping the garlic up because large chunks of garlic are always the kids' favorite.
I feel like everybody has done this, in their own kitchen, and also it is super relatable to know that this is something that happens in everybody's household. I don't know if folks who are tuning in, but if you all, we have Alan saying that they use cider vinegar in many of their pickling recipes, which I know is a great way to use it. But any other things that folks are using, feel free to drop them in the chat. Maybe something that you like with kale salads. I'll tell you what, I love cutting up some beets and carrots and other root vegetables and roasting them with some salt and pepper and a little bit of cinnamon and nutmeg, and adding that to a massaged kale salad too with whatever dressing we concoct up.
I think like toasted walnuts would be really good too.
Oh, that sounds delicious. And if you want to stay wild, I don't know if I would suggest this to anybody, but butternuts can be found in Vermont, but it is a hell of a task to shuck butternuts out of their shell. They are some of the hardest things that I have ever experienced.
Yeah, they're about as hard as it gets when it comes to nuts. There is, oddly enough, down in the south here, as you get closer to the New York state line, there's also shagbark hickories.
Yeah.
I don't know if they grow much in other parts of the state, but here and there you can find those, and they're ever so slightly easier to shell than the butternuts are.
That's some good advice. I know I see them around all the time. So, and I'm up here in the Milton area, so I'm sure other folks are running into them too. Any technique tips that you have for getting a good massage on the kale? You didn't need to go to masseuse school or anything like that.
I did. You got to work the kinks out for sure. Find all the knots. You could do a Reiki massage kale salad.
Perfect. I don't know. This seems very niche-y for Vermont, so I imagine this might be somewhere. And I'll just have to say, I know, Ryan, you are part of rural Vermont too, and while maybe they don't have kale massaging classes just yet, there are a ton of events that are coming up that rural Vermont does across the state. So I'm adding those links in the chat too for people to check out. Lots of great things happening from, I know they've been doing meat processing workshops to diving in on more traditional foods from folks who have been here, and really everything in between. So highly recommend people check out rural Vermont. And I look at that salad. I mean, it's nice and soft and looks like it'll be a perfect accompaniment to any dinner that you're doing. And like I said, feel free to add stuff to it and make it your own. Is there anything else you want to add, Ryan, about your cider, about your farm, or anything that's going on?
Well, we have a little song that we can all about massaged kale salad. And so we'd love to sing that. If the choir and chorus would like to join me, if you want to be on TV, you guys, come on over back on this side.
This is a Vermont Wild Kitchen.
And you can see who's been poaching all of this kale. There's like
we need everybody.
A whole
You
crowd
got a whole
kale
crew
poacher.
behind you. All right.
Massage kale salad, it's good for our head. Massage kale salad, it's good in your bed. Rich and delicious and keeping us fed. Wonderful, wonderful kale salad. Yay!
I think we could just shut down Vermont Wild Kitchen forever on that note, because that was one of the most wonderful things that I have seen. And folks, if you are running in to the Yoder farm at your farmers markets, make sure you request a massage kale song from them as you pick up vinegar and other veggies and food that they're producing. Ryan, thank you so much for being on. And we're going to transfer over to Megan now, who has been waiting in the wings, and she is going to show us a little bit about trout and what we can do with that. So, Megan, welcome. Thank you for being on the Vermont Wild Kitchen.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So what do we have? What do you have for us today?
So we are making rainbow trout with maple syrup and honey and some red pepper. I really like the combination of the maple syrup and some red pepper, like a little bit of sweet and hot. So yeah.
That sounds lovely. And I think you're about to show us a tutorial on how to break down a trout for folks who maybe aren't sure. But how much experience do you have in breaking down a trout, Megan?
That's a great question, Shane. I'm very, very new to it. I actually learned today. So
amazing.
If anything goes horribly wrong or I lose a finger, you know why.
We are live, so we're gonna try to avoid losing a finger. But I think it's important to note that it's learnable. The skill is there. You want to be careful, and there's so many resources out there for how to do it, including the Vermont Wild Kitchen. And like Megan, I mean, I know you've done a couple today, but like, how did it feel learning the skill that you maybe hadn't been exposed to or just hadn't had an opportunity to use before?
I'm pretty excited about it. I actually think I'm going to come back down, but put my face near the fish. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to be something that's really useful in the future. So the Maritime Museum actually hosts fish processing clinics with Vermont Fish and Wildlife. So I can do that next year and help out with the clinic. They also used to do fish processing during fish camp. And it really depends on the group of kids, whether or not they're really excited to cut open one of their fish or whether it's really upsetting to cut open one of their fish. So we'll see
Yeah.
this year if I can whip out this skill during camp.
And it's such a whole process of getting to know your food in a new way. And I know some folks grow up with it, but some folks, myself included, didn't. So even learning this as an adult was really fascinating to really be able to dive in. And just for folks' knowledge, for Fish and Wildlife, you can still fish for trout on water bodies open to trout fishing, which you can find the regulations online. And the season ends on March 15th. So there still is some time. And then it's going to reopen the second Saturday in April. And if you want to try fishing, but you're not sure where to start, there are going to be some spring fishing clinics, as well as some collaborations into the summer with folks like Megan and the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum, where you can also get some experience with keeping your catch and processing. So take it away. I'd love to see the skills that you've learned, or if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I'll go for it. So this is actually, I have done 8 of these today to practice for this very moment. So we'll see how it goes. The first thing you want to do is you actually want to kind of wipe off your trout. You don't want him super slimy because you don't want to end up losing the fish while you're cutting it. You don't want it to slide away on you. It's kind of like a trout massage, but not quite.
If it doesn't have a song, I don't know if it's really up to snuff.
That's fair. So then you're going to lay it so that the tail is towards your dominant hand and the belly is towards you. So from here, can you see me all right with the fish? You can see the fish?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to make a cut right behind the gills, and we're going to kind of angle the knife so that we're getting as much of that flesh behind the head as possible. So if you can see from here, I'm kind of angling it towards the back of the fish's head. And I'm going to cut down until I hit the backbone on the top, and then cut down into the belly down here. And then I'm going to go immediately before the anal fin and start cutting up the belly.
And for folks who maybe haven't done this before, when you were learning this, did it feel accessible? Like, what were some of the maybe sticking points that you had, or what advice would you get for people who maybe have only done this a few times or are just learning the skill for new?
Yeah, I think really making sure it's not slimy anymore is a huge one, because I did lose one where I just gripped it and like shot out of my hand.
Okay.
And I feel like that's not ideal when you're holding a very sharp tool that you're trying to catch a fish again. But other than that, it's really pretty straightforward. I think the biggest thing with it is that it's a little bit intimidating, but you can't really mess it up. Like, you can't ruin it. It can be fixed every time.
That's some really good advice, and I think probably fair for a lot of things that you're doing at home. Like, of course, there's some expertise, but practice makes perfect, right? And you're never going to learn if you don't practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So then I'm going to take this knife, which is a little bit more flexible, this fillet knife, and I'm going to put that in my incision behind the head and kind of angle it back towards the tail and just start going through. And I'm going to stop talking for a second so you can hear the sound it makes. So that is the sound of the ribs, and you actually want that sound. You don't want to be going down so far that you're against the backbone and you're scraping that, but you are going to be crackling along those ribs. So I'm going to keep.
And you're cutting the fillet off of this right now. Mm-hmm. And I know with trout too, you could leave it. Oftentimes I have just taken out the insides of it and basically have left it on the fish too. So if you have a nice big trout like this, it's a great way to get to some of that meat. But if you get some smaller ones, you also don't necessarily need to go all the way into the fillet process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can leave the skin on. someone at the fish hatchery today recommended that you leave the skin on when you're grilling it. So that's a really good one. Okay, so then I just have to flip him open like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this belly fat right down here. That's not really helpful for us. And then I'm going to find the ribs. So you could actually, this is a really kind of tactile process. And you're going to find the ribs right here. And just kind of scooch down. And then you'll cut off those ribs. You'll see them right here.
I love it.
Now, there's another row of bones right along in this part of the fish, and they're very, very skinny. So you could theoretically leave those on to cook it and just pull them out when you're eating. My family tends not to like bones in their food, so I'm going to cut all them out also.
Perfect. And I think you can tell, like you learned this skill earlier today, and you're already feeling pretty confident in it. And take your time. Like people can take their time when they learn something new. You don't need to fly through. And if we can maybe take a breath, it might even just make things more fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to remember that, like, I had to do all this quickly for this video, but normally you don't have to learn it in a day. You could just practice and only do, I don't know, like one fish a week as you catch them versus a whole bunch in one day to try to figure it out really fast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, even if you don't catch any fish, it is A-okay. You should just get out there and get on the water if you have a chance.
Absolutely. So then what I'm going to do is, now that I've laid it out with the skin side down, I'm actually going to slice along so I can cut that meat off of the skin. And I'm going to keep my knife pretty much flat. And the goal isn't really to cut. You just want to be basically sliding the knife through to separate it from the skin. So you can see right here where I still have skin, but then I also have the flesh that's a little bit separate.
And for folks who are doing this, you know, it's pretty amazing how the flesh of the fish will come off of the skin too as you get it going. So it might not feel intuitive, but all of a sudden it slips off, and you feel pretty good when you like just slide that knife through and you're like, oh, look at this nice chunk of meat that we have to enjoy.
Yum.
All right. And then here's my filet.
That is amazing.
Wow.
So from here, what I would do is flip it over and then do the other side.
Megan, what kind of trout is that? Do you know?
It's a rainbow trout.
Rainbow. Cool.
Yeah, and I know we have someone from Fish and Wildlife monitoring some comments. There is so much wonderful information out there about trout that are native to Vermont, those that are stocked. And Fish and Wildlife does a really great stocking program where you can actually see where they're going to be stocking things. And again, lots of clinics to be able to go out there and learn how to do some of these skills that maybe you didn't grow up with or you just want to practice with as well. So highly recommend checking out their events page, as well as, again, I think just making the effort to go out and try something new. I don't know, Ryan, do you fish yourself? Did you grow up doing it?
I used to when I was, like up through high school, I would go fishing, but no, I haven't fished in years. And the last times that I fished was catfish, and it was a skinning process rather than, so I actually hardly remember the last time I processed a trout. I think it was little tiny brook trout in Colorado, maybe.
Yeah. And what about you, Megan? Do you get out on the water at all to go fishing?
So in the past, before starting to work at the Maritime Museum, I tended to enjoy fishing in the sense that it's a nice time to be outside.
Yeah.
And everyone else in my family would fish, and I would bring a book and sit by the lake, which is also great.
It's a great way. Yeah, that's a great way to go fishing.
So, but this year with fish camp, here, I'll tilt myself back up now that I have my fish. This year with fish camp has been a big change where now a couple weeks out of the year, I'm down by the lake with kids fishing all day long. So it's definitely a great way to spend the work day.
Yeah, and I will say, I know folks tuning in, you may have a whole wide range of experiences, whether it's with wild food or growing food or fishing, and there really is nothing better than being able to share those skills. And for maybe folks who are feeling nervous about something or they just don't know, ask a friend, ask a neighbor. I know that part of the reason that I even got into wild foods was making a friend in Vermont Fish and Wildlife who agreed to be a hunting mentor, and I was able to also fall into some groups as well to learn more about mushrooms. So there's so much knowledge out there that folks can pursue, and you're going to run into people all across the state who really are eager to share some of the things that they're so passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had the same experience with mushrooms, that it seems like people who get into foraging mushrooms are really excited about mushrooms and really excited to share their knowledge. And I think that's the same for anyone who has like these niche specialties where we get really excited about it in our personal time and then we want to share it.
Yeah, definitely. So what's next in your process here?
Yeah. With fish, you can always learn from Vermont Fish and Wildlife. They're an amazing resource. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start mixing together all of my other ingredients that I'm going to use to coat the fish with. So I'm going to use some maple syrup that actually you can probably see now that the sun's going down. The maple trees that this syrup would have come from are right behind me and out that window. It's made by my husband's family, and that is, it's really exciting to have it this close that you can look right outside and see the trees and the Bartholomew's make it. So.
And that's Cobble Knoll Orchard?
Yeah,
right?
Cobble Knoll Orchard in Benson.
Awesome. I just put that in to the chat for folks too. I highly suggest checking it out if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, in the fall they do pick your own apples and sell the syrup made by the farm, and it's awesome all around to have so much food grown right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some syrup. I could measure it out, but like Brian said, it might as well just kind of guess at it. You can never have too much syrup, to be honest. So I'm aiming for about 3 tablespoons. And then I like to use a little bit of honey, just because it's slightly thicker but still sweet. So it adds more of like almost like glaze to the fish versus just a liquid sauce. So I'm using honey that was made in Rutland, Vermont, Gracie's Bees.
And I am adding your recipe right into the chat for folks to be able to look at too. So if people are interested in doing this specific one, I also just love and appreciate how both of you are embracing winging it sometimes. Because I don't know about you all, but when I'm in the kitchen, oftentimes I'm just like, this seems like a teaspoon of salt. This is like a tablespoon. And of course, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you all have, but I've messed things up terribly sometimes. But more likely than not, you're gonna be okay.
Yeah, and I think baking tends to be a little bit more precise, but overall cooking, it's just based on your taste.
Exactly.
So then I'm going to use some paprika, and I'm giving it a few good shakes. It's probably like half a teaspoon. And some salt. This is actually garlic salt, because I don't have any regular salt. I've run out of that. So
intense conversations about garlic powder and just how necessary it is. So combining the two, I can't imagine salt and garlic powder is probably going to be out of this world.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. And then also I have a little bit of butter that I already put in here and some minced garlic. I figure you probably didn't want to watch me mince garlic. If you didn't have any fresh garlic, you could always use the powdered stuff though. And then what I'm going to add here is a little bit of chili powder, just because we in our family tend to like stuff spicy. So we'll add a little bit more of a kick to it.
Love it.
And then I'm going to add some red pepper flakes.
I'm just so excited for the idea of the sweet and the spicy all getting mixed together. And fish is such a wonderful ingredient to be able to get that really baked in or really cooked into whatever you're doing. It's such a good vehicle for those flavors.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you could always add other stuff. Like citrus goes really well with fish.
Apple cider vinegar.
Some apple cider vinegar, always.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just adding some of those fillets that I cut up earlier. I'm going to kind of mix them around. So now,
And folks, earlier in the chat, I dropped in a link for people who maybe have a lot of good experience with fishing and want to share that. And you can sign up to be a Let's Go Fishing instructor. And they're always looking for people. And even if maybe you don't want to do that, I will tell you for a fact, and I'm sure Megan can corroborate this, but partnering with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and partnering with different farms as well, people want to share their knowledge and their products, and they want to get this out. We're not mass producing these things. We're doing this with love to feed our communities and the skills to feed our communities. So reach out, ask questions.
yeah, absolutely. And becoming a Let's Go Fishing volunteer is really rewarding. They have clinics for people of all ages. So if you're an adult just starting out fishing, you can absolutely join a Let's Go Fishing clinic. And then there are also youth clinics.
Definitely.
Or also clinics that you could just go the whole family. So, so what I'm doing here is I am taking a piece of foil and putting it on my pan to be able to make kind of like a little, can't think of a better word for it other than like house for the fish.
Yeah, a fish house.
Yeah. So I want to be able to keep the moisture in, just because the best fish tends to be really nice and moist still. You don't want it to be all dried out. So I'm going to pour all of my extra deliciousness on there. Okay, I'll angle you down so you can see.
Perfect.
Here we go.
And I'm always struck with just how easy this actually is. And it's not super time consuming. It's no more than what you probably would be doing if you are able to find the time to make dinner that night. And sometimes it just feels a little bit more intimidating to maybe process something, but
yeah,
we've only been talking for about 20 minutes here. Ryan, you and I talked mostly about vinegar. The kale salad took 5 minutes to make. And we're being able to pull together basically a whole entire dinner.
Yeah, absolutely. So now that I have my little fish house, now I can put it in the oven. And I'm going to bake that for 10 to 15 minutes. I also use the foil wrap like that on the grill in the summer.
Wow,
That's a really great way to do fish when you are outside and it's great weather. And if you wrap it in foil, then it keeps all that moisture in. So here's some that was already prepared.
By TV magic.
Process for you. And here we go.
That
So
looks
this-
amazing.
Yeah.
man.
Right. I think this is always, and I say this maybe every episode, but The worst part about hosting this virtually is that I see all this amazing food being made and I'm just nowhere near it. So I have to then go into my kitchen and start to scrounge it up with a rumbling stomach already.
Oh,
Yeah.
man. That looks so good.
It does look great. And you want it to be able to come apart easily. That's part of how you know it's done. And as long as it does, you are good.
Oh, wow.
Awesome. Megan, thank you so much. Ryan, thank you so much. Is there anything that you all want to add before we sign off for the evening from the Vermont Wild Kitchen?
Thanks for having us. This was fun.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
And folks, for those of you who are tuning in, like I said, we are starting to reimagine what the Vermont Wild Kitchen will look like. We're planning to do some in-person events, so keep an eye out. And a big thank you, both Megan and Ryan, for sharing not only your skills, but your love for the food that we're seeing in the kitchens today. And I encourage everybody to go in, check out what they're doing, both at the Lake Champlain Maritime Museum and at Yoder Farm. And with that, I wish you all a lovely evening, and we will see you again in the Vermont Wild Kitchen very soon. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, have a good night.